Welcome to Go Learning Point tutorial. So in this tutorial, we'll talk about in and exist operator that we have in Oracle and what are the differences between those two operators and how they can be used for different purposes. So if we talk about those two operators, Oracle in operator and exist operator, they work for the same purpose. And in both the cases, in both the operators, we'll be using a main query, which will be our outer query, and the inner query, that will be our subquery. Okay, and then these operators will be used to correlate between those two queries. So basically, both will check for the records correlation between the main query and the subquery. Okay, so both in and exist operator check for records record correlation between main query, that will be our outer query, and inner query, so that will be our subquery. So now let's compare the working of in and exist operator, and let's see what are the difference in between those two. So we'll talk about them one by one. So first of all, we'll talk about in operator. So what happens in case of in operator, we'll be having one outer query, that will be our main query, and we'll be having one subquery. So first of all, the subquery is going to execute, and whatever the values we'll receive from the subquery or inner query, then based on those values my outer query will execute. So in this case, the subquery is going to execute only once. So the first point will be our subquery will execute. It will return the set of values, and those set of values will become input for my outer query. And based on those values, my outer query is going to execute and display the result after matching those values. Okay. So the first point is the inner query. In case of in operator, the inner query is executed first, and the list of values obtained from the inner query will become an input for the outer query, and then this result is used by the outer query, and the inner query will execute only once. Now the next point is once my subquery has been executed, that subquery is going to return the set of values. Okay, and in case of in operator, this is going to get the value from outer query, and it will match it with the complete all the values. So all the list of values that we have received from the subquery, this is going to compare the value that you have received from the outer query. This is going to compare it with all the values. So it's not like if it has find a match in the first point only, so it will not stop right there. Okay, so this is going to scan all the values. So the point is the in operator scan all the values inside the in block. Okay, so this will not stop once it find a match, but this is going to scan all the values. So suppose we have 5 values written from the subquery, then this is going to make the 5 comparison with the value that we have received from the outer query. And then accordingly it will return the matching values, and then it will pick the matched values between the outer and inner query. So based on the comparison, the in operator is going to return the list of matching values. So as you can see that in case of in operator, this is going to compare the each value returned from the outer query with the list of values written from the subquery. So this is going to be a performance hit. So it is not recommended. So in case you already know that for how many values my subquery is going to return, so if it's a small number, then in that case you can use in operator. But if you know that your subquery is going to return multiple values or set of values, those are very big amount, big number of rows, then in operator is not recommended. So in case of big number of list, from the select list, in operator should not be used, because in that case this is going to slow down your SQL query. So now as you can see that my subquery is going to return set of values. So in case of in operator, either you can provide a subquery in the parenthesis in the inner query, either you can provide a subquery or you can provide set of values as well. So in operator is going to work in both the cases. In case of subquery, or if you're providing direct values in the parenthesis, in that case also this is going to work. Okay, so in can be used on subqueries as well as with list of values. So that means at the end, my subqueries are also going to return set of values, or either you can provide set of values directly. So if you already know that if we have 5 values, let's say if we have department ID in case of employee department relationship, if you already know, will be already knowing that we have 5 number of departments, so you can just provide department IDs there, the list of values 20, 20, 30, 40 and 50. And if you don't know, and but that you know that this is going to return a limited number of records, then in that case you can just provide a subquery, select department ID from department table. Okay, so that means at the end this is going to compare the result returned from the outer query with the list of values returned from the subquery, right? So this is kind of, so, and we talked about that this is going to compare each value. This is going to compare the value that we have received from the outer query with each value returned from the subquery. That means this is kind of a OR operator relationship. Okay, so what does it mean? That in operator is used as multiple OR operators, right? Now let's talk about the exist operator. So when you will be discussing about exist operator, you can identify the what are the differences between those two operators. So what happens in case of exist operator? So we talked about in operator and it's working as well. So in case of in operator, subquery is going to execute only once, and this is going to return the set of values only once. Okay, so but in case of exist operator, my outer query is going to execute, and then whatever the value we have, based on that value my subquery is going to execute. So the number of times my outer query is going to execute, that number of times my subquery is also execute. Okay, so let's say suppose we have my outer query is returning 10 number of rows, then the subquery will also execute it, will also be executed 10 number of times. Okay, so the point is the first row from the outer query is selected, then the inner query is executed, and the outer query output uses this result for checking. This process of inner query execution repeats as many number of times as there are outer query rows. Okay, so whatever the number of records we have in our outer query, that number of times my subquery is going to execute. So that is, if there are 10 rows that can result from outer query, the inner query is executed 10 number of times. Now as we talked that in operator is going to return the set of matched values. We talked about this point. In operator picks the list of matching values. But what will happen in case of exist operator, this is going to return a boolean value. So as soon as it finds a match uh, between outer query and inner query, it will return a boolean value, true or false. Okay, so that's why this operator is faster than in operator, because it will always be faster than working in a boolean value than working on the actual values. Okay, so the point is the exist operator is a boolean operator, so it works more efficient and faster than in operator. because instead of working on the actual values, this is working on true false values. Okay, so it will be faster to process boolean values rather than processing values itself. So this point will raise a one more point, which will become our difference between in and operator, that this is going to return a boolean value. That's why exist operator is faster than in operator. Okay, so exit returns a boolean value like true or false. Exit is faster than in. Now, in case of in operator, as we already discussed, that in operator is going to match the values returning from the outer query with each value returned from the subquery. But in case of exist operator, this is going to stop as soon as it finds a match, the value which we have received from the outer query, and this is going to compare it with the subquery, and as soon as it finds a match, this will stop right there. Okay, so exist quit after first occurrence. So this is not going to compare the values from outer query with each value returning from the subquery. So that is also one of the reason why exist is faster than in. Now the next difference is we talked about in operator, that this is going to use uh, in case of we are working with subqueries as well as with the set of values. So we can provide the set of either we can provide subquery which will return a set of values, or either we can directly provide set of values. But in case of exist operator, we cannot provide set of values, so we have to use subquery. So exist operator will make use of a outer query and subquery. So this is not going to work with a set of values. At the end, my subquery is going to return the set of values, but we cannot provide values directly. Okay, so the point is exist can only be used on subqueries and not with list of values. So the only thing you need to take care of is you need to provide proper joining condition or proper conditions between the outer query and the subquery, because in operator is not recommended when we have when my subquery is going to return multiple values, a big number of rows. In that case, exist operator is better because this is going to provide boolean value as soon as it will find the first occurrence of matched value. Okay, but depends that you need to provide proper condition between the outer query and the subquery. Okay, so exist shall be used with proper condition. That is going to make your query faster. Now the next point is we talked about in operator, that this is kind of a OR operator, multiple OR operators, right? What happens in case of exist operator? This is going to quit after the first occurrence. That means this is kind of a any operator relationship. Okay, so exist is used to check whether the subquery returns any rows. So these are the few points those we need to remember while working with in and exist operator in Oracle. And let's see how these are going to work practically. So we'll take an example of a table, and then we will see how these two operators, in and exist operator, works. So here we will take an example of these two tables. So let me just show you what we have in those two tables. So in the first table we have only single column, and the values we have as 1, 2, 3, 4. So let me just copy it first. And the second table we have two columns, call 2 and call 3. Let me just copy those two columns as well. Now let's say suppose I want to compare the values from the first table, that means the call one, with the second column of feature table. Okay, so how that is going to work in case of in operator. So I'll just be writing this query: select everything from We have only single column. So select everything from T1, T2, TT1 table where my col 1 in the column 3 from the TT2 table. Okay, so select col 3 from TT2. So this is going to compare, this is going to, first of all, this is going to execute my subquery, and this is going to return 4678. Then this is going to compare the values from the outer query, that is my select asterisk from tt1. So this is going to compare 1 2 3 4 with 4678, and this is going to find a correlation between these two, the main query and the subquery, and then this is going to return the matching values. So we have only four that is matching in these two queries, the main query and the subquery. So let's just try to execute this. So as you can see, we have value as 4. Now let's see how this is going to work in case of exist operator. So what you need to remember in case of exist operator, we talked upon in one of the point that you need to take care of the conditions between the outer query and inner query. So I'm talking about this point, uh, this one. So exist shall be used with the proper condition. Okay, so what are these conditions? So I need to provide a join condition between tt2 and tt1 table where tt1 dot col1 equal to tt2 dot, and we are going to compare with col3. So this is how the exist query will look like. So let's just try to execute this. Okay, so we have the same result that we have received from with the in operator. The only difference is this is going to return the boolean value and this is going to return actual values. Why conditions are important in case of exist operator? Because let's just try to remove this and now try to execute this. So this is going to return all the values from the outer query. So this will not match the values returning from the outer query with the values returning from the inner query. So you will have to provide proper conditions while using exist operator. Only in that case you will find the expected result. Now in case of in operator, as I already know that I have in call 3 I have 4 6 7 8, so I can just directly provide values here 4 6 7 8. Those will be comma separated. So let's just try to execute this now. We are going to get the same result. Okay, so in operator is going to work even if in case of a subquery and even if you provide a list of sub values, list of values. Okay, so but this is not going to work in case of exist operator. So if I'm going to provide here 4 comma 6 comma 7 comma 8, this will not work. So as you can see, we have an error here, missing select keyword. So missing select keyword, that means you are missing the subquery that is a part of exist operator. So it's always recommended that if you know that my subquery is going to return limited number of values, in that case use in operator. And if you're not sure that how many number of records my subquery is going to return, then in that case use exist operator. That will be much faster. Okay, so if the majority of filtering criteria is in the subquery, use in operator. Otherwise use exist operator. Okay, so the summary points, those you need to remember while using in or exist operator. So the first point for in operator is if you have a smaller number of records returning from the subquery, use in operator. And if you have large number of rows returning from the subquery, use exit operator. So if the majority of filtering criteria is in the subquery, use in for big outer query and small inner query, and exist for small outer query and big inner query. Okay, so these are the points you have to remember while using in and exist operator. And thanks for watching my channel, and thanks for watching my tutorial. Like, share and subscribe to my channel to get more updates.